Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the Binge Factor.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Binge Factor. I'm Tracy Hazard, and today I have a podcast entrepreneur who's the Frugalpreneur. Don't you love the name of that show? Yep. So I have Sarah St. John here today, the Frugalpreneur, and we're going to talk about budget podcasting. We're going to talk about all the different ways that, kind of honest. I love the bootstrap model. So to hear Sarah talk about it as a necessity, as just a way, an approach to everything she does, is really great because, as she will point out, she spent a ton of money doing some things and it didn't get quite the results. So then she started to think about it from a different perspective. So being a little more frugal and bootstrapped about your show doesn't hurt anyone. Now, we don't want to go too far and bootstrap ourselves into something where we're creating so much work for ourselves that we don't have any time to record our podcast or to do our core business that is around our podcast. So we want to make sure that we're balancing that out. But when you get started with something, especially when you get started and you don't know the value of the money you're going to be spending, it's a really good idea to be frugal about that. And, this is just something that I really believe in. I don't think you should pay a lot of money to take a course to learn how to do something. I really don't. That is not something that's the way that we work here. Like, courses are free. We want you, if you're going to deep dive into something, you have to know that it's a value, that you want to do something deeper in this. So that's exactly Sarah's model. And she has got some great books and couple of great podcasts, not just the Frugalpreneur. So Sarah St. John is an entrepreneur, podcaster, online course creator, and author. She's created several startups throughout her entrepreneurial career of over a decade. She is also the podcast host of Frugalpreneur, Building a Business on a Bootstrap Budget, which aims to show people how to launch and manage an online business on a budget. And today, who isn't and who shouldn't be on a budget? That's right. So I'm so glad to bring you the Frugalpreneur, Sarah St. John. Sarah, it is so great to talk to a seasoned podcaster who's got multiple feeds going on. She's got Frugalpreneur mindset, which I love. Plus, you've had some of my favorite people on your show. One of your more recent guests, Mike McAllowitz, one of my favorite people all time. I love talking with him. He's just awesome. So you have done really well for your podcasting yourself. But what got you started to begin with?
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's an interesting...
Think back.
Yeah. Well, okay. So technically, it's kind of a journey. So in 2008, I had 6 different jobs that year, not at the same time, but throughout the course of the year, and decided that, working for myself is what I wanted to do. And so I started a photography business, and I realized that while I like taking photos of animals and architecture and landscapes, I didn't like taking photos of people, but that's where the money is. I was taking photos of like portraits and weddings. The bigger issue than that was actually the expense involved in maintaining equipment and software and lighting and all of that. So I decided to switch to an online business model because there's very little overhead, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I tried a bunch of different things like blogging, affiliate marketing, drop shipping, all of that.
So you've been in and around the whole like marketing and all the sections of entrepreneurship all around.
Yeah.
Kind of trial and error.
Yeah, kind of the whole shiny object syndrome where I hear about a different way to make money online. And so I try that and then I don't really like it. So then I try another thing. And it was kind of in that process that I discovered all these like free or affordable tools and resources and software that you could use to run a business close to free, but definitely on a budget. And so I decided to write a book called Frugalpreneur to kind of talk about the different ways to make money online and the different software to use. And while I was writing that book, I decided to launch a podcast also called Frugalpreneur, but it was just going to be an extra basically marketing avenue to get more exposure and whatnot. It was just going to be like 10 episodes. I was interviewing the CEOs or people within companies of these different software programs I talked about in the book, but I was getting more leverage and traction with the podcast than the book. And I really enjoyed it. I love the connections I was making and the networking. And so I've kept that up. I've had it for a couple years now.
You're
Almost
like
at,
well over 80 episodes. Like I think
yeah.
88 was what I saw recently.
Yeah, I
So
think, yeah, well, I think it's in the 90s now, actually. Yeah.
wow. Wow. So quite a big journey. And that's so interesting because people bug me that I haven't published my book yet. It's been sitting on the shelf behind me for a really long time. And part of the reason that I haven't published it is because my podcast is so much more current that every time I go to do the final edit, I'm like, oh, we got to change this, we got to change that. And I can't publish it. Like it's just won't happen. So I can see that there's just some people that the dynamic opportunity in podcasting is just so much better. And that seems like what you've fallen into and found.
Yeah, definitely. Because they say have a book as a business card, which I think in some ways makes sense because it's physical. You can hand it to someone instead of an actual business card, you give them a book at a conference or whatever. But I don't know. I'm just finding that podcasting is working a lot better.
Yeah. Well, so you've done a few things that I find really interesting that I want to bring up right now. And that is that you've created, sometimes we call them spin-off feeds. Sometimes we call them mini feeds. And this is kind of like an in the industry term. So it's not something like the listeners would call it. They're like, oh, it's just another podcast. And so you've created Authorpreneur and Podcastpreneur. And so you've got this kind of category of episodes that are within your existing one. And
Mhm.
that has helped you to narrow it down. Are you using it on lead pages? How are you using that separate podcast to generate, like, specifically with Authorpreneur, how are you using it to generate new business, to get more clients?
Yeah, so I got the idea to do that because one, I actually have written 3 books now, all by those titles: Frugalpreneur, Authorpreneur, and Podcastpreneur. It's like the preneur trifecta or trilogy or whatever. And so I thought, I might as well have a podcast for each book like I did with the first one. And I was having so many, I think I had like probably 10 episodes in a row just about self-publishing because during COVID and everything, I was doing so many episodes and recording so much that I decided to do like a whole week on self-publishing. And then I did like, I think 2 whole weeks on podcasting. So then all of those episodes are in Frugalpreneur, but I decided to take out the ones specifically for self-publishing, put them in its own podcast, and then same thing with the podcasting ones. And I really don't, I mean, I have a, call to action, I guess, at the beginning of the episodes about the books. But other than that, I mean, I don't really promote either of those two. It's more like if someone's searching in a podcast directory and finds it and listens to it. But so I mainly just promote Frugalpreneur because it has those episodes in it.
It's
Like,
easier to promote one show and then have the sub feeds just be found at the same time. Yeah.
yeah, and I even say, like, I recorded a separate intro for each of those saying, this episode originally appeared on the Frugalpreneur podcast or something like that.
So you're cross promoting. That's good.
Yeah, yeah, in a way, yeah.
I love that. Well, you run an ad at the beginning, so it runs before your actual intro. How is that with a call to action? Do you find it getting traction for you?
Are you referring to like the call to action for my own things or?
Yeah, for your own things. So
Oh,
typically
okay.
you might run an ad or something at the beginning of it.
Yeah, so I've only ever tried it at the beginning. Well, I do have a call to action at the end, which is just, if you like the episode, rate, review, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, which now I'm kind of questioning. Anyway, that's a whole other topic.
It is a topic. We'll get back to that because I don't want to leave everybody hanging on that. We'll debate that one. But yeah, how is that call to action like right up front doing?
I think it's actually doing pretty well. I mean, it might do even better in the middle, and I'm starting to debate that because especially if it's the same call to action, people are going to, get used to it and they're going to know how long it is and they're just going to say, skip 30 seconds or whatever. But I think it's definitely better than, doing it at the end, because either people know it's the end of the episode, they turn it off, or they don't even make it to the end because maybe, you know,
they got
they're
busy and
skipping.
yeah, you never know. Sometimes they burn out. Yeah, part way through it.
Mhm.
That has nothing to do with your show, right? Like
Right.
sometimes we just leave it and we forgot we had to go do something. So yeah, no, the thing is that I think on our platform, on the Monetize platform, what we see from all the people that run ads, and we can see clearly, is the ones that run the pre-call to action, where it's like before your intro or right after your intro. So it's like an extended intro in a sense, tend to have lower listenership overall than someone who runs it slightly towards mid-roll. It doesn't have to be right at mid-roll. So like if I ran an ad on this show, I'd introduce you, like I'd have my music, I'd have my intro, I'd introduce you, and then I'd run an ad. I don't happen to run an ad on the show, but if I did, I'd run it right there before you started speaking, before we did the like interview portion. So it's about 5 minutes in before the ad ran. And so because of that, there's this intrigue that is happening that's like, oh, well, who is this Sarah person and what is Frugalpreneur? And I want to hear this. So they're more willing to just sit through it and not skip it, because they don't want to skip the first question. They don't want to accidentally pass it because they have no idea how long the ad's going to be. And, mine, I don't, even when I run them like 15, 30 seconds. So they're not long. And so, they wouldn't even bother to hit the button. And so they tend to do better in terms of capturing listeners. And I think maybe, and it's just my view of this, like I can't survey the listeners who basically aren't listening to a show. Like that's not possible. But I think that what happens is when they check out a show and there's a call to action right up front so quickly, they think the show is a little salesy. And it may be not as much in service. So I think you try it. Hey, move it, see what happens. I think it might do, because your call to action is actually really good. Like the ad itself is really good. So maybe just moving it.
That's a good point. Cause I thought about like the whole mid-roll, like after you're kind of already interviewing someone or in the middle of your episode, and then putting it kind of in the middle. But what you're talking about actually might
It's kind of a natural
better.
break. Yeah. Yeah. And because we don't have to on the Monetize platform, like actually do the ad at the time we're recording, then I can say, hey, let's go to the interview with Sarah. And then before the interview, my voice on the other side goes, wait. I have to tell you about my offer first. Right. And so you can make it kind of funny and, you can make it a transition on the other side. And that's the only piece you have to record. So you can add it later. So that, that I think might really improve for you, because not that you don't have a great show already, but if someone's new to your show, not understanding that you're not a pushy salesperson, because you're very helpful, you're very informative, that they might not give it a chance. And so that would be unfortunate.
Yeah. Cause because most of my call to actions are my own thing, whatever that might be, my ebooks and whatnot. But I just recently this month started doing, and so you're probably talking, especially if you listen to the Mike Michalowicz episode, I believe that one did have an actual sponsored ad in the front.
Yeah, there was a sponsored ad, and that was at the pre-roll. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even those, I think you could run a mid-roll, and actually they do better for your sponsor if you're able to, because some ways they're put on by the host, they're put on by Megaphone, or they're put on by Anchor, or they're put on by one of the companies. So you don't have a choice because they're streaming ads, right? But if it's your ads and your sponsor, you get to choose where it goes. So what I find is I get more sponsors who stick around and come back because the ads performed better if they're in the mid-roll position. And that's because the number of listeners are up. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to have to
I have to think about all this. But so you've made some shifts in your show and you've done some of those things. So let's talk about, when you make the shifts, did you announce it to people? Did you tell them what was going on? Like, how'd you handle that as you started to do more and more and you got your new books in?
No, I didn't really. The only thing I think that I kind of made an announcement on was that, so in 2020, my show was mainly like interviewing, CEOs or people within companies. Then it kind of shifted to interviewing people that I kind of look up to, admire within the entrepreneur space, whether it's through podcasting, affiliate marketing, whatever it might be. But then in 2021, I wanted to switch gears and interview people who started a business with less than $1,000 and bootstrapped it without any outside capital or debt or credit or loans or any of that stuff, up to $1 million, not, or seven figures, whatever, but not in the course of a year necessarily, not like an annual salary of seven figures, but, at some point reach that milestone. And so I did do one podcast episode where it was just me. It was like 5 or 10 minutes saying that was the direction I was going to go for 2021. And if you or someone fits that boat or fits that description, apply here or whatever. Now, not every episode I've put out in 2021 has been that, because I've found it kind of difficult to find people who meet that exact.
It's really hard. Well, there's like some crazy statistics out there about the percentage of businesses that ever even make it to $1 million anyway. And it's really low, let alone ones that bootstrapped it their way there from, so yeah, it might be a little too narrow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I've interviewed maybe like a handful. And actually those episodes have actually done better than any others. So I think people like those episodes, but it's just difficult to find someone to interview every single week on that specific topic. But back to your question, I think that's really the only time I've made like an announcement or let people know
that you were looking for this shift and you were changing it. Interesting. So yeah, well, I think that's what I think that most people underestimate. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I think that they think that's a big deal when you make a change to your show. And I think going with the flow is fine. And your listeners are kind of along the ride anyway, that they don't see it as a dramatic shift. They're like, oh, that's cool. Great. This is wonderful. And anyone new to it is just new to it. So they didn't know what it was like before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think my plan in 2022 is to do more solo episodes. They're not all going to be solo, but to do more of those. And then I have I'm thinking about having like kid entrepreneurs on.
That's a great idea. I like that. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. But I probably have to think about like, do I have to get
You have to get parent permission. Yeah, I bet you do.
Like some kind of release or something, probably something. So I have to look into that. But so I have all these different kind of. Oh, and I want to get a bunch of people from Shark Tank on. So it's like I want to do these like.
So we're already stepping into our three things. So let's go there, because getting great guests. So you've got some great guests. Like you had, like, as I mentioned, Mike, he's not that easy to get on your show because he's really busy. He does a lot of podcasts, but he's really busy. So it is hard to get him scheduled in. How do you get great guests?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another big one I've had recently is Pat Flynn.
Yeah.
So the thing with Mike Michalowicz was, okay, so I had tried to get him on the show, I probably 3 different times. And I think either I didn't get a response, or when I did, it was like, oh, he's not doing interviews right now or whatever. I don't even remember at this point. But the way I ended up getting him was, well, first of all, it helps that he has a new book coming out, which, by the way,
so he was on the road, the virtual road.
Yeah. Or I don't know if he quite was yet when I interviewed him, which would have been, I think it was July. And his book comes out in September, but it's close enough to where he's starting to think about podcasts and whatnot. So that's, let's say, I guess a thing to mention is
you caught him at the right time,
Yeah. But I was actually a guest on someone else's show who, I guess, I don't think he like knows him as a friend. He's more of an acquaintance, I think, of his. And at the time I had a email signature that had a link to My Dream 100. And I took that idea from the Hustle and Flowchart guys, which I'm not sure. Oh, okay.
Yeah, they've been on the show. So yeah, they talked about that.
Oh,
the Dream 100.
Yeah, so I had a little link, and I guess he had clicked it in our communication about the podcast or whatever. And so when I was on his show, he was like, oh, I saw that you want Mike Michalowicz on. Well, let me do an intro for you. And so, I mean, it still took, like, he did the intro right away, probably the next day. But then I had to hear back from his like assistant or something, and so on and so forth. And it was kind of this back and forth. So it probably took about a month or 2 for him to actually get scheduled. So that was a story with him. With Pat Flynn, Another one I tried to get on a few times, and on that one, I don't think I ever heard back because like the only way to really contact him is through like a contact form, which then goes to his team. He probably never even sees it, unless the very select few maybe that get through to him. And well, he has a new, well, it's probably about a year old now, but a private community, a paid community called SPI Pro. It's like $50 a month. And one day I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and join it. And, because I try not to spend too much money because I'm the frugalpreneur. And so I was like, well, let me just see how it goes. Because there was a bunch of like little mini courses in there and whatnot. And so, well, his SPI Pro is on it's not a Facebook group. It's called circle.so. It's a third party thing. Well, on there you can direct message people. And this wasn't my plan or goal, but
and so, I mean, what we're hearing here is the story of persistence here.
right. Yeah, definitely. So once I realized that I could direct message people on this platform, I was like, well, I might as well. So I just sent him
hurt.
So I think like the first day I was in there, I sent him a message asking if he'd like to be on the show. And I told him what it was about and sent him a link and everything. And within 2 hours, I heard back from him directly and said, he had already scheduled, because I had sent him the scheduling link too, just in case.
Yeah, be efficient about it, right? Like, why go through the like back and forth? Let's just get him in while he's clicking.
And yeah, so that's how that one came about. And I guess maybe the lesson there is sometimes you have to, I wouldn't say pay to play, but I'm saying pay. If you're paying to be in a community,
use the access that it provides you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, those are some great ideas for how to get bigger guests and how to get greater guests. Thank you. I mean, that's really valuable. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Now, everyone wants to increase listeners and get better engagement with those listeners. I hear this. I mean, I hear it from the most seasoned podcasters that it's still what they're working on, right? So we're always improving on this. Have you found anything that has really worked for you in terms of a boost of listeners or boost of engagement?
For listeners, I would say guesting on other podcasts, because if someone's already listening to a podcast that you're on, they're much more inclined to go check out your podcast. Then if it's
easy, why not? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Because they're already a podcast listener. Whereas if you were to post on social media, which I do, and I recommend you do it just because, people aren't too likely to, unless it can play like right there within whatever app, they're not likely to click on it and then it go to another app. And then, so I think guesting is definitely one way. I hate doing paid ads in any way because
the frugal in you. I'm with you, Sarah. Like, I have never paid for an ad for our company.
Oh, wow.
And I just wrote out a check. I'm not kidding you. Just wrote out a check like 2 days ago to this company that we're kicking off the program with tomorrow. And I was like, it hurt. I was like, well, we've been in this, since 2016 for the business portion of it. So, I feel really good that we made it, almost 5 years without actually doing that. So, but it's time. We can't grow, we can't grow to where we need to grow. You don't get to 8 figures and 9 figures without some advertising.
Well, yeah, that's true. So I did take out an ad on, what is it? Castos? Is it Castos or Castro?
Castos. Yeah. Castos is the app. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's only like $99 for 7 days, which I'm like, okay, I think I can do that. Most ads like on Overcast are in the hundreds. And so I'm like, well, I'll try this one. It hasn't run yet. It's not running until I don't know when this goes out, but it's running in a couple of weeks because I guess it's that far booked out or something. It's kind of like you sign up and they pick the dates or whatever. But I figure $100 for 7 days in a podcast app,
which makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, I might as well try it. I can do $100.
But I love your thought process, Sarah. I really do. It's so funny because I typed in frugalpreneur.com and it's available. But it was like $1,200. Yeah. And I was like, and part of me was like, oh, it's available. And then I go, $500 with, why would she buy that? Like,
Mm.
like, why would she need that? Because it's not really important at the end of the day, you could do Frugalpreneur pod and it'd probably be $1, right? And it still works from your
Right.
podcast, right? So like there's some spends you just shouldn't do. And then others you should say, what if it got me 100 listeners? What if my $100 got me 100 listeners? That's a good spend. Like, so
Right.
thinking about where you're going to do it. So yeah, I think that's a good test for you. How fun.
It's
So we'll have to get a report back and find out how it does.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny though that you mentioned that, because whoever owns that domain or the broker or whatever contacts me probably on a weekly basis asking if I want to buy it. And literally every single time I'm like, so how much is it now? And
So
I think the lowest.
My tip to you is, I think it would cost you less to file a copyright. It would cost you like $50 for a copyright, and then their name is useless. Well, because it should be, because you have your book title.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and if you did a trademark, I think it'd be about the same cost, but the value would be there long term.
Yeah, I have looked into that. I've thought about that. But yeah, basically I just tell them, well, let me know when it gets down to 100. 100 is
Good
my
for
number.
You. Tell them where your threshold is. I love it. That's so great. That's really funny. I love it. So, well, the third thing we go over on a sort of our tips section here is we go over monetization. So how have you been able to monetize your show?
So one way is through affiliate marketing, where, let's say, for example, when I am interviewing someone with a software program, like in the earlier episodes, in the show notes, I'll include the affiliate link, or they may create a special link or like a coupon code for the listener, like get 25% off with the coupon code Sarah25. That's been a frequent one. And then people, they can go directly to that website versus having to go through any kind of affiliate link, and then just use that code and they track it back to me and I get commission, all this stuff. So that's one way. Also with affiliate marketing is books. A lot of times I'll have someone on who's written books, and like Mike Michalowicz, for example. And so in the show notes, I'll just link to my Amazon Associates affiliate link.
Right.
Which, yeah, you're only getting 2 to 3% or something like that. So it's not much, but actually you get commission on the full cart value. So
yeah, whatever else they buy in the cart, you still get money from. So yeah, you never know.
Right.
They could be heavy buyers like me. You just never know. So yeah, that's right. So because you had a sort of affiliate background, this seemed like a logical way to go into it, but it's not paying, the hefty bills here. So
right.
Have you found anything that you feel like is headed towards maybe working as you shift into, your almost 100th episode and then beyond?
Yeah. So one way would also be through the books, though I actually give the ebooks away for free. That's like my lead magnet or my call to action. But if someone wants the physical books, they can, that's one way of making a little income. But I mean, just like affiliate marketing, it's not a lot. I tried the whole merch thing, like, Frugalpreneur merch, and that never really went anywhere. And then, but I think sponsored ads, which unless you have a whole bunch of downloads, like in the thousands, that's not going to pay a whole lot either. All of these are just like little ways to kind of stack, I guess, or
But I would think that there's got to be sponsors out there that want to be associated with the Frugalpreneur brand, and like, thinking of it from that perspective, because their budget software, their budget, advisors, whatever it might be, that they're selling, that association with that brand. Because I mean, think about the type of people who read the penny saver. And I may be, I don't know, do we even have penny savers out here in California? I don't think we do. I'm from New England originally, and penny saver is definitely a Connecticut thing. But that penny saver mindset was like, if you didn't have your good coupons in there and you weren't offering that and you weren't putting ads in there, then you weren't reaching the audience who really was going to go buy a deal. And so, you're not in the right place. So maybe that's the key for Frugalpreneur is it's just brand association value and not download value.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what I'm working on. Actually, I've approached a few companies about that and some of them are interested. So, but I think the biggest way probably to monetize a podcast would be if you have your own products and services. And I don't mean like products like little, books and shirts that's $20 here and there, but like if you have a course or like, you have the podcast production agency, or if you have any kind of agency or any kind of service, or maybe you're a coach or a consultant,
So
any of
something
those.
that's a little more high ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so basically I use the ebooks as kind of a lead magnet, or whatever you want to call it. Do you call it a lead magnet when it's on a podcast versus, I don't
I
know,
think
but
technically you do, but who knows? If you got a free download of something, I think it's still a lead magnet, right? I know the digital marketing terms are like so blended into the podcasting world. So yeah, let's go with that. We'll say that that's the case.
And then of course, then you can market to them through email in addition to your podcast. But yeah, with the podcast, people just get to know, like, and trust you because they're hearing your voice over and over, at least on a weekly basis, probably, if not, more often. And I think they're more likely to hire you, buy from you than, some ad on Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you realize you had binge listeners at some point? Like, did it go like, oh my gosh, somebody's binging on all my episodes? Like, did that occur for you? Did you even notice?
Well, there's been a few times where, just suddenly the numbers, jump up. Like, I think one time it jumped up by the exact number of episodes I have.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, well, that
That's a
must
flag. Yeah.
that must be one person who downloaded every episode. But yeah, so, and I think getting emails or social media direct messages or even ratings and reviews, any of that kind of stuff, getting that feedback is helpful to know what people like, what you're doing right or wrong, I suppose.
Before we go on, I don't want to forget that we did promise everybody we would talk about ratings and reviews. So let's talk about
That's
this
right.
before we head into our whole bingeability segment. So ratings and reviews, like what, you kind of alluded that you're not sure you want to have that call to action at the end of your show anymore. Why is that? What are you finding with rating and reviewing?
Well, first of all, this is partially based on other podcasts I've listened to that are about podcasting, where they're kind of saying that you're kind of wasting, I guess, valuable space, or because the likelihood that someone is going to rate or review just because you ask them to isn't very likely. They say it's
Because it's
usually,
complicated.
yeah. And even if you tell them how to do it, I mean, people apparently don't have time for that. Yeah, so I mean, I was already kind of wondering or questionable about that anyway, but then lately hearing various podcasts talk about it, and you know, and the rating, well, I guess I don't know where all the ratings are coming from, but a lot of the reviews, because you can rate it without reviewing it. Some of the reviews have come from people that have been a guest on my show, and not because I've asked them to, just because they've said, hey, I really enjoyed this, I'm going to give you a good review, that kind of thing. So there's been a couple of those, and things like that. So I feel like, yeah, I suppose it maybe someone might rate your show because you asked them to, maybe, but I don't know about reviewing,
Well,
because
I'd
that's
rather have somebody share my show, right? Wouldn't you rather
that's
have somebody
true.
share it? So so when we do it here and we're recommending it to our setup clients, the ones who are about to launch, is we say, look, if you really want your ratings and reviewing, the only time they really matter is in the first 8 weeks, because it has to do with the Apple algorithm. So it has a boost in there. And so, and of course, your show is brand new. Some ratings help people decide, oh, this is worth a listen. So that's not a bad thing on any app. So for the first 8 weeks, do that, but then switch your call to action part, or whatever you say in your outro. Like we actually sometimes make 2 outros, and then at the 8-week mark, switch it. And then it's, if you really enjoyed the show, the best thing you can do for me to thank me is to share this, right? So you're inviting them to you just serve them. Now you're inviting them, and there's no reason why you shouldn't ask. And so, share it with a friend who has a frugal mindset, like it could be easy.
Yeah, that's a good point, to only focus on ratings and reviews the first 8 weeks when it actually matters more than any other time, and then switch it to sharing. Because if you ask them to rate, review, subscribe, and share, which I think is
Yeah, what
what
everybody says at the end, let me tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, because if they share it, then that probably does more for you than
Yeah. But keep in
ratings.
mind, most people don't listen to the outro. Like,
True.
right? They're like going to skip it anyway. But if you're going to ask them to do something, ask them to share it. Cause I think
Mm.
that's if there's anything that you want them to do, that is it. Tell a friend.
You
And
know, that makes me think, and maybe there is a way to do this. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but I wish there was a way, if there isn't, to where, like, say you're in Apple Podcasts or whatever app and you're listening, for you to just hit like share and it posts to social or email. Does that already exist?
I don't know. I'm not an Apple user. I'm not an
Ah,
iPhone user. So like that's a Tom question and I will ask him that. But I'm a big fan of Good Pods. That's been
oh
the
yeah.
app that I've been listening to the most. And it's super easy there to share both within their platform and share out of it. So to
Mhm.
Instagram something or do that, it's super easy there. I think it's a really good platform for that. So that's one of my favorite parts about it is how easy all of that is right there while you're listening to something. So like I don't have to go out of listening to your episode. I can actually rate from within your episode or rate from your show level. Like it doesn't matter where I am, I can rate. Where Apple, you've got to navigate out to it, I believe, and get to the right section. Because I mean, believe me, we've done a lot of rate and review pages that show people how to rate and review. That's how difficult it is. So,
Yeah, I actually had JJ Ramberg on.
oh, good. You had JJ on. Oh, she's going
Yeah.
to come on the show soon. I'm
Oh,
looking forward
okay.
to having her. So,
Yeah, I really do like that app. But of course, I don't know what percentage of podcast listeners use that app or any of these other like more social sharing.
it's pretty low.
But
It's pretty low right now. I mean, the lion's share is
yeah.
still Apple and Spotify and Google.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of wondering if those big ones have a way
Well, I
to
think,
do that.
that's what the little apps need to teach them. Right. Like
Yeah,
show them how good it should be. Right.
right.
Like if you're, let's emulate some of these good apps, like Good
Right.
Pods. Right. So Sarah, so people are binging on your show. What do you think your binge factor is?
I think the binge factor is, well, a few things. One, that at least this is what I've been told, is that I'm a good interviewer, or I keep the conversation going. It's not like I have a set list of questions that I'm just like boom, boom, boom. And, someone answers the question and then I just move on to the next thing. It's more of a conversation. People feel like they're sitting in, I think, overhearing a conversation between two friends, probably. So I think that aspect, plus I tend to sometimes ask questions that either aren't common or haven't been asked before, and it's not always intentional. It's just kind of where the conversation, goes.
So I think you're almost there, Sarah. That's kind of it. It's the way, because you have a specific direction, right? Because you're so clear on the fact that this is the frugalpreneur and you're clear about this bootstrapping model, you ask questions from a different perspective.
Mm.
And when someone says something, you push back a little bit, and in a really nice, sweet way, mind you. You are not in any way an aggressive host, which there are some out there. You are not like that at all. You're super sweet, nice, but it's kind of like, you're like, well, I'm kind of curious, like, what if you didn't have money to do that? What would you do? And so, that is your brain, I think, thinking through this, like, how would I do that bootstrapped? And you're expressing that in the questions you ask. And that's really great, because I think that's what your audience is sitting back going, it's like, yeah, it's great. Mike McCallowitz has this huge group, but how am I going to do that? And you then ask the question about, how do you do that when you're at this stage of it? So I think that's really it, is that your point of view, the frugalpreneur, the frugal point of view, is not talked about enough. And your perspective on that is so strong. You feel very strongly about it, that it's important, and that you're not going to open your pocketbook for just anyone. and just anything. And you ask the questions in that way. And I think it has a curating effect that is so strong that makes me want to hear how you tackle this next person. So even though I might have heard JJ Bramberg, Pat Flynn, and Mike McAllowitz on a bunch of other shows, I know I'm not going to get the exact same conversation.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it. Maybe that's where I was heading with that.
That's your binge factor, right? That's your binge factor right there. So psychoanalyzed by us here.
Right.
So I love it. Well, I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who want to start a podcast, but they are thinking that I can't afford it. Mm. What is your budget advice, your frugal advice for those who want to start a podcast?
Yeah. So you can technically start one for free, if you use Anchor, or there's a couple others that have free plans, and you could use your Apple or your earbuds for the mic and
your AirPods, I think.
Or AirPods. Yeah,
whatever they're called now. I don't know. Yeah.
So, if you have absolutely no money whatsoever, you could do that. But I recommend, having a budget of about 100.
I agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. Not necessarily per month, but just one time, and get a mic, which I have an ATR 2100. There's also the Samsung.
This is mine.
Oh,
exactly. Yeah. Mine's like the pro version of the 2100. So yeah, exactly. But they're cheap enough and they last for a long time. I think I've had this particular one for 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the only mic I've ever had. So a couple years. And I think it was like 60 or maybe $80.
60. Yeah.
USB mic, you plug it right into your computer, and you can get like a boom arm and a pop filter and all that stuff for it as well, which is like, $5-10
I think you got the foam cover on it. I do too. I think you can buy like 5 of them for $1 or something ridiculous like that. So those are even cheaper. Like,
yeah, exactly. And also I recommend, if you're interviewing people, to have either headphones or earphones or earbuds, whatever, so that when, like we both do, so that there's not an echo when it's coming through the computer.
It's just going to make better sound quality. And it's like, how cheap are these? Like I buy them by the dozen sometimes, because I like the really cheap ones without the microphone. So I don't have to remember and like look and see, did I screw up the microphone, like, settings or anything? And yeah, I buy them for like, I think I buy them like 10 for $10 on Amazon. And, they don't last forever. They start to, fritz out, but then I just throw them away and get another pair. Right. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one will steal them because they're cheap. So they won't disappear off my desk.
And I've thought about getting the AirPods. Yeah, that's what they're called.
We just interviewed someone earlier on our coaching call today, and she had on the big ear AirPods, whatever they're called, the giant $550 ones.
Oh,
the sound was actually really good, but it has a microphone in it, and it's not as good as this mic.
Oh, no, I'm talking about like the ones you just put in your ear though.
Oh, I think they call those AirPods.
AirPods, yeah. But I think they're like 200 or 300 or
they're still expensive, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like,
Yeah, so maybe not for me yet.
Yeah, so it's easy to get started for under $100. I think a lot of people assume that it's expensive to get started because they're imagining or envisioning like a broadcast studio for radio, and so they're thinking they have to have all this equipment and
Yeah, you don't. You've got Zoom already if you're running a business, so just use it. Right. You don't have to enroll in anything else. You don't have to do anything fancy. Yeah. Well, Sarah, what advice do you have for podcasters? What do you think they should concentrate on? If they're not concentrating on worrying about spending a bunch of money and doing a bunch of equipment, what should they concentrate on?
Well, I guess it depends on where they are in their journey. I mean, if they're just starting out, I would focus on consistency and patience, because I think it's pod fading. That's the term, is a common thing. On average, people make it to like 7 or 10 episodes. But statistically, I think they say you have to have a podcast for like 3 years for you to really see some big, results, I guess. And whatever.
We typically see it at, if you get to over 50 episodes, so like, which is usually a year's worth for most people, right? If you get to over 50 episodes, you should start understanding what's the measurable factor for you? What should I be measuring? What should be the outcome that I can expect from my show? Is it authority? Is it actual business and lead generation? Like, what is it going to be for me? You'll find it somewhere in that first 50 episodes. If you get past 100 though, you've now done something successfully with incorporating it with your business that you're not likely to quit. That's kind of just what we find here. And I think you're hitting right at that point right now. So you're like, I kind of found my stride, and now I'm figuring out how to incorporate that into my business and make my business stronger. Plus I love it. So why would I give it up?
Right, exactly. So yeah, I think just patience and persistence, a general, this can apply to podcasters and really anyone, is to try to avoid shiny object syndrome. Which is
coming from a girl who started that way, right?
Right, exactly.
Treat podcasting as the shiny object you should keep holding on to.
Right, exactly. And I think that's in part why I stuck with it, or why it's now my main focus, is because I guess it was a shiny object, but not in the sense that it didn't, because a lot of the shiny objects, it was just,
they don't pan out, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I think once you finally find that thing, then hopefully you don't have as many shiny objects. But yeah, because it can become a big distraction and waste a lot of time. I feel like I wasted a lot of time over a decade of doing this, that, and the other thing. But I guess, some people say, well, if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't have written the book about all that stuff, which then you wouldn't have started the podcast. So I guess there was a point to it.
There you go. Well, Sarah St. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. So glad to talk Frugalpreneur, and glad to see a frugal podcaster out there bootstrapping her way to a bigger business.
Thanks so much for having me.
I really enjoyed my call with Sarah today. I mean, I love her philosophy, just kind of aligns with mine and everything. I love that we could deep dive further into it. But, the funny part about listening to her is like, she reminded me so much of someone else who's in my network. And when that happens, it's such a great thing. So after the call, I said, I know where you live, and I have this other person who lives near you. I swear to God, she could be related to you. Let me introduce you. And I love when I can do that at the end of a podcast. I love when I can make a deep connection for someone to someone else who's really going to serve them, their business, and their growth well. And that's what I was able to do for Sarah. And that's my favorite part about doing these podcasts and getting to know your shows, right? If I get to know your show and I get to know you, I can make matches right there, because I have this giant Rolodex in my head. And a Rolodex, I know, is a very old school term, and I'm showing my age, but I have it in my head, and I can just make these natural connections between the best podcasts for you to listen to help you take your next step, or the best person for you to meet to help you grow your business to the next stage. And knowing that I'm matching her with someone who's also frugal, like, makes it even better, because I understand a little bit deeper about you. And that's my favorite part about being a podcaster too, is that when I meet someone who's listened to my show and they're calling me to talk to me about their services or, their event, and they like me to speak there, we already have an understanding of where I am and what I can bring to that process. Right. And so that's what the great part about your podcast is. People are getting to know you, and they are absolutely farther along in that process of being able to make better referrals to you, being able to make better connections for you, and being able to provide better services, assuming, of course, they actually listened, right? And of course, that's my process here. So I want to listen to shows. I want to see how good they are. I want to point out the really good things that you're doing and help you improve the things that you're not. So I'm going to do a special episode, or maybe by the time this airs, probably by the time this one airs, I may have already done it, but be looking for it. I'm going to do a special episode about how to listen to the Binge Factor and Feed Your Brand, for that matter, because for both of them, so that you can decide what's worth taking in. Because the last thing I want is for you to say, oh my gosh, Sarah St. John, Frugalpreneur, Tracy raved about it. I'm going to go and I'm going to copy everything about Sarah's podcast. I don't want you to do that for any of the podcasters that I recommend, because it might not be a right fit for you, number one. It might not be in your budget, number two. And number three, maybe I just skipped and didn't tell you some of the things that they weren't doing as well as others, and I was only highlighting the really good things. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about that in a short episode that I'm going to put in between all mine here, because I do want to give you just a little sense of how to listen and get the most out of the binge factor as we move into our second 100 worth of episodes. And I'm enjoying them immensely because we have so many great and interesting podcasters, just like the one we had on today, Sarah St. John, the Frugalpreneur. So until next time, until the next podcast, the next show, I'm Tracy Hazard on The Binge Factor.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.